So, Tish'a BeAb is here again. In Masechet Yoma in the Talmud Yerushalmi, the following line is found. Kol dor she'enod nivneh beyamav, ma'alin alav ki'ilu hu hecharivo. Every generation in which the temple is not constructed, it's as if that generation destroyed it. This statement should get us thinking. Our generation is not worthy of the Beit HaMikdash. In fact, if it were standing, it would be destroyed. Essentially, what that means is that God does not want to dwell in our midst, or rather that we're not allowing God to dwell in our midst. So we have a problem. Luckily, our problem does have a solution. So actually, we all know the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of the big three, right? In terms of the second temple, the Gemara Masechet Gitin records a narrative in Agadah which illustrates why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. And I think that if we can understand this narrative properly, we'll know what to do and what not to do to make the Beit HaMikdash a reality. So I'm sure many of you have heard about this Agadah before. I've personally heard it. I've listened to many classes today, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. But I also find that every time I think about the story again, learn it again, I find something new. So I think it's worth revisiting. So here we go. Again, this is in Masechet Gitin. It starts off, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mai dichtiv ashrei adam mefached tamid umakshe libo yipol bera'ah. Rabbi Yochanan asks, what's the meaning of this pasuk? How can we understand it? And then the Gemara lists three narratives which illustrate this pasuk. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and other two narratives. Gemara focuses on Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So let's just remind ourselves of this story. So there was a certain man who had a friend named Kamsa and an enemy named Bar Kamsa. And this man, let's call him the host for a second, he wanted to have a feast and he told his servant, go and invite Kamsa, his friend, and instead the servant goes and invites Bar Kamsa. Okay. This host is walking around the meal and he finds Bar Kamsa sitting down. And the host says to Bar Kamsa, what are you doing here? He says, Kum pok, get up and leave. Bar Kamsa says to him, look, I've already came, please let me stay. I'll give you money for whatever I eat and drink. Hazid, he didn't want to be embarrassed. And the host says, la, no. So Bar Kamsa says, please, I'll pay for half the meal. And the host says, no. Bar Kamsa says, please, I'll pay for the whole meal. And that did not work. The host said no. He took him out, stood him up. And now what was Bar Kamsa's reaction? He said, since the Hachamim were sitting at this meal and didn't protest, it must have been that they agreed with this. And therefore, I'm going to go to the government, the Romans, and inform them that the Jews are rebelling. So he went to the emperor and said, Mardu bach Yehudaeh, the Jews have rebelled against you. And the emperor says to him, who says this? Who says that this is the case? But Kamsa says to him, look, let's test this out. Send them an offering and see whether they'll sacrifice it. So they give him an animal, and on his way to the Beit HaMikdash, he makes a blemish in the animal, and therefore it shouldn't be offered up according to halacha. Anyways, they bring it now to the Beit HaMikdash, and the rabbis, they were inclined to offer it because, look, they said, we don't want to offend the government. And Rav Zechariah ben Avkola says, what do you mean? People are going to say that blemished animals are offered on the altar. So then they try to think of other solutions. Okay, let's kill Bar Kamsa. He's the one that brought the animal. They say, oh, no, people are going to say you killed people who make blemishes in the animal. At the end of the day, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolas convinces them to sacrifice the animal. And Rabbi Yochanan says at the end of this story, the excessive humility of Rabbi Zechariah destroyed our temple and exiled us from the land. Now, I personally read this Agadah and I have a bunch of questions. Actually, and so I wanted to address those questions here today. The first question I have is, what's with this pasuk in the beginning of the whole Agadah? Ashrei adam mefached tamid umakshe libo yipol bera'ah. How does this Agadah illustrate this pasuk? Right? We have this pasuk as the title, and then we have the story. What's the connection? 2, the story revolves around the host, but doesn't even state his name. What's with that, right? It's like the Bad Kamsa and Kamsa. Meanwhile, we never hear about Kamsa, we hear about the host. 3, if the host and Bad Kamsa were enemies, why did Bad Kamsa come to the meal? Didn't he know he would be thrown out? Why would he put himself in such an awkward situation? 4, and why does the host hate Bad Kamsa? What made them enemies, right? That caused a lot of friction in the story. We don't even know why. And 5, if we have time, why do the Hachamim remain quiet at the meal? How can we understand their actions? So before we delve into these questions, I want to acknowledge 2 sources that helped me personally as I was thinking through this Agadah. So one, Rabbi David Foreman, if you haven't checked him out, he has a lot of videos on aleph-beta.org. He has great videos on Sinat Hinam, which helped me. There was also an article by Rabbi Shimon Klein on VBM, the virtual Beit Midrash. I'm just throwing this out because you should tap into those sources too. There's a lot of great things out there. So, question 1, right? How does the pasuk, happy is the man who fears always, but he who hardens his heart shall fall into evil, relate to our story? So if we think about this pasuk in Mishlei, constant fear is presented as an advantage as opposed to hardening of the heart. Fear is a good thing. Now, when I hear hardening of the heart, I don't know about you, but my mind automatically jumps to Paro. Right? Paro had a hard heart. He was stubborn. It took till the 10th plague until he let Am Yisrael out of Egypt. The Torah also actually describes Sichon as having a hard heart. He didn't want to let Bnei Yisrael pass through his land, and he wanted to go out and fight with them. So this hard heart is a stubbornness. It's my way or it's the highway. Now, when we think back to the first half of the pasuk, happy is the man who fears always. Why is fear a good thing? Sounds like someone who's afraid, right, is able to properly perceive and feel what's around him, and then he could react accordingly. Versus someone who has a hardened heart, he doesn't properly perceive what's going on around him, and he doesn't respond correctly. Now, again, by stating this pasuk at the very beginning of the narrative, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, reader, this pasuk, it directly relates to the story. So let's think. So, the host accidentally invites Bar Kamsa to the feast. Bar Kamsa shows up. The host makes his round, notices that his enemy was present. Now, the host is probably wondering, what is Bar Kamsa doing here? Rabbi David Foreman points out that what should the host have done? He should have zoomed out and also noticed, okay, I see Bar Kamsa here. I noticed that Kamsa isn't here, right? That was his friend. Meaning he should have realized something happened. There must have been a mistake here. And now he should have let it slide. This is a public setting. It would have been, in Bar Kamsa, wait for a second, I'm sorry, I jumped. Bar Kamsa, maybe he thought, the host is making a move. Maybe he wants to make peace with me. And he invited me to the party. So Bar Kamsa is willing to come. And he thinks, look, being that we're in a public setting, it's aib. The host isn't going to be mean to me. This could be a good opportunity to make peace. But the host does not budge. In his mind, Bar Kamsa equals enemy. And he wasn't willing to see otherwise or consider using this opportunity as an opportunity to make peace. At this point, the host has a hardened heart. Now, the story continues. Bar Kamsa notices that the Hachamim at the meal were silent. They didn't do anything. And he goes to the Romans and causes the nation's downfall. At this point, Bar Kamsa's heart is hardened. He was mistreated and upset, and there were no 2 ways about it. It was time to take matters into his own hands. He was unwilling to budge. Bar Kamsa, gets the animal from the Romans, now goes to the Beit HaMikdash, and then we hear about the Hachamim. The very end of the story, remember Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. He was unwilling to consider the ramifications of his actions. What will happen if we don't offer the animal? He says, nope, we got to do it. And being the fact that he wasn't able to consider other things, he, in a sense, had a hardened heart. Remember that stubbornness, inflexibility. We got to do this. So many hardened hearts. Now, unfortunately, this concept of a hardened heart is very relevant in our day and age. We all have hardened hearts, are inflexible in certain respects, And we're so we're so used to labeling. He's black hat, he's a white hat, and therefore we're unwilling to hear someone else's opinion. We label and judge so quickly. We're stuck in our ways. They're wearing this, they must be that. They're wearing this, they must be that. Our way is the right way, and I'm not even willing to consider what they think or what they're doing. Their approach is for sure wrong. Mishle says, Ashrei Adam mefached tamid. Again, don't be so sure of yourself. Don't be confident in saying that your approach or train of thought is the only accurate way of thinking. Be willing to hear others out. So often people don't even take into account other people's opinions because of, oh, that's their rabbi? Okay, dismissed, I'm not even listening. It's so easy to label someone as wrong. Actually, recently I went to Igloo and I was online. It was a very long line because only 10 people could come into the store. And so the line was outside, and the person in front of me, there was a mother, and it was her son's birthday. So she told her son, honey, Sarah's on the phone. You want to give her a beracha, it's your birthday, you should give her a blessing. Now, I was thinking, as someone who just saw this happen, someone could watch this and think three things. Either one, this is so beautiful what this mother is doing. Two, I have no idea what this mother is inventing. Or three, let me think about what's going on here, right? Why is she telling her son to bless someone else? So actually, I was part of that third party, and I was with someone, and this caused us to discuss the concept of a beracha. And we came to the conclusion that it's actually so beautiful to wish someone else well, right? And she was taking this opportunity to tell her son, who was like a little 7-year-old, give a beracha to someone else, think of someone else. I think we have to train ourselves to not have judgmental eyes, but train ourselves to have learning eyes. Okay, maybe I could learn something new, right? Maybe I'm not right. Now, number 2, a question 2 that I asked earlier. The story revolves around the host, but doesn't even state his name. Why not? I think this is the way of the author telling us as readers, the host could have been anyone. It wasn't uncommon back then, and unfortunately today too, for people to have friends and enemies. And why was Bar Kamsa enemies of the host? It's not significant. What is significant is that one Jew hated another Jew. I cringe when I hear today about people hating other people. It's so real. People will cut other people out of their lives, not talk to them. And I think we have to reflect on our own relationships. Can our names be filled in as the host? Where is the friction in our own lives? Do we hate people and refuse to make peace with them? This is one of my favorite Pesukim in Mishlei also. It says, the path of the Torah or wisdom is pleasant, and all of its ways are peaceful. Who are we fighting with and why? The rabbinic authors of this Agadah wanted us to put away with fighting, with all this friction in our lives. You're not talking to your sister, your brother, your mom, your cousin. Why? What's going on? Why would God want to dwell amongst people who can't dwell peacefully amongst themselves? Yes, they did something wrong to you, but the fight is not worth it. Talk out the situation with them. And I asked earlier, if the host and Bar Kamsa were enemies, why did Bar Kamsa come to the feast? And I sort of addressed this a little bit earlier, but I want to dwell on this a dot more. Perhaps, as I said earlier, Bar Kamsa thought this was the host. The host had a change of heart, right? We all deep down want peace and happiness. And the host was actually doing the difficult move of, stepping his first step forward, being that vulnerable person to tell the person, I'm sorry that I did this. It's not easy to do that. But living in a peaceful, happy society isn't easy either. It takes hard work. Let's question our own selves. Are we those people? I think now, Tish'a BeAb, we should be thinking, how can we take this step forward? How can we end this friction? And lastly, I asked, why did the Hachamim remain quiet at the meal? This is really bothersome to me, because when it came to matter of halakha at the very end of the story with the korban, they were discussing it, and then they decided, okay, we have to offer this korban to follow the letter of the law. But then when it came to someone being embarrassed, no discussion or protest was raised. And I think we should be asking ourselves, how do we view halakha in contrast to the way we treat others? Do we give one category more weight than the other? Are we quick to go give tzedakah, but then we're, easily as quick to go scream at our mother or sister, right? This narrative should cause us to reassess, realign our values, and think about it. Now, I love reading this Agadah because it makes me realize, unfortunately, how much I can relate to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. This Agadah is not outdated at all. Unfortunately, it depicts a society we're all familiar with on some level, and its messages, and we could all relate to its messages. So one, for us to walk away and think about our own stubbornness in our own lives. Where do we have stubbornness and inflexibility, that hardened heart? Having hatred in our hearts, or misaligned values like the Hachamim had. We have to stop and reassess. We have to change. As I said at the start of the shiur, Kol dor she'eno nivneh b'yamav ma'alin alav ki'ilu hu hecharivo. Every generation in which the temple is not constructed, it's as if that generation destroyed it. We could walk away sad. And the Agadah and the Gemara should sadden us. That's just the truth. But it should also give us hope. We now know what we have to work on. So let's make a commitment today, this Tish'a BeAb, to do just that and create a more peaceful society in which God wants to dwell. And may we merit to see the construction of the Beit HaMikdash b'mehera b'yameinu. Amen.